Late one evening in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside of Atlanta, Georgia, 34-year-old Marcus Bell was driving home after working late at his tech firm. A lead software engineer and well-known in his community for mentoring underprivileged youth, Marcus led a peaceful, quiet life. On this particular night, however, his life was about to change forever. As Marcus turned onto his street, flashing red and blue lights suddenly filled his rearview mirror. Startled but compliant, he pulled over, rolling down his window and placing both hands on the steering wheel, just like his parents had taught him when dealing with the police. The officer, Daniel Krantz, approached with a flashlight in hand and a hardened expression. Without stating a clear reason, Krantz immediately demanded Marcus's license and registration. When Marcus politely asked why he was being stopped, Krantz's tone turned aggressive. "You fit the description," he said vaguely, never elaborating. Despite Marcus's calm demeanor and cooperation, Krantz accused him of seeming nervous and ordered him to step out of the car. Marcus complied, heart pounding. As he stood on the side of the road, Krantz proceeded to search the car without consent or a warrant. Marcus objected, reminding the officer of his constitutional rights, but Krantz responded by placing a hand on his holstered weapon and warning, "Don't get smart with me." At this point, Krantz's body cam, which should have been recording everything, conveniently malfunctioned, cutting out just before the search. After finding nothing, Krantz let Marcus go without issuing a ticket or citation. No reason for the stop was ever documented. Marcus drove home shaking, his mind reeling with disbelief and humiliation. Despite doing everything right, he had been treated like a criminal. The next morning, Marcus filed a formal complaint with the police department, but it was immediately dismissed as procedural. No follow-up, no apology. When Marcus requested body cam footage of the incident, he was told it was corrupted due to technical issues, a phrase used far too often in cases involving racial profiling. This wasn't just about a traffic stop anymore. Marcus realized it could have ended much worse, like it had for so many other black men across the country. He remembered the names George Floyd, Philando Castile, Daunt Wright. He thought of his younger brother, his nephews, the kids he mentored in coding workshops. If someone like him, well-dressed, articulate, law-abiding, could be treated this way, what hope did they have? Fueled by both personal anger and a desire for systemic change, Marcus decided to fight back. He contacted a prominent civil rights attorney, Naomi Hughes, who had previously won landmark cases against racial injustice. After reviewing what little documentation existed and hearing Marcus's account, Naomi agreed to take the case. Together, they prepared to sue Officer Krantz and the city for unlawful detainment, racial profiling, emotional distress, and civil rights violations. Word began to spread. Local media outlets picked up the story. A small but growing wave of public support formed behind Marcus, even as police officials downplayed the situation. In the court of public opinion, the lines were being drawn. But what no one could have predicted was how deep the truth went, or how explosive the revelations would become once the case reached the courtroom. This was no longer just Marcus's fight. It was the beginning of something bigger. After the traumatic traffic stop, Marcus Bell made a critical decision. He would not remain silent. What had happened to him was unjust, but far too common. The humiliation he felt, the helplessness, and the cold rage simmering underneath all pointed to one thing. This couldn't just be another incident swept under the rug. He needed accountability, not just for himself, but for the countless others without a voice or platform. That's when the lawsuit began to take shape. With the help of civil rights attorney Naomi Hughes, Marcus filed a formal lawsuit against Officer Daniel Krantz and the City of Brookfield Police Department. The lawsuit accused Krantz of racial profiling, unlawful detainment, illegal search, and psychological trauma. Naomi framed the case not just as an individual grievance, but as a reflection of deep-rooted systemic racism in American policing, particularly in departments where officers like Krantz operated with near absolute impunity. As the legal filing made its way through court channels, the story began to draw public attention. Local activists amplified Marcus's experience through social media, and within days, it gained regional coverage. News segments highlighted the eerie similarities between Marcus's stop and other high-profile cases of racial injustice. "This isn't about one bad cop," Naomi said during a press conference. "This is about a system that protects and empowers misconduct when it's aimed at marginalized communities." The city government quickly went into damage control. Officials issued a generic public statement promising to investigate the matter. Internally, while the Brookfield Police Department, in full defensive mode, stood by Officer Krantz. The department claimed that Krantz had followed standard procedure and that there was no evidence of wrongdoing. Behind the scenes, however, they were scrambling. They feared a civil lawsuit that could open the door to scrutiny far beyond this single incident. The police union doubled down, aggressively painting Marcus as a man looking to cash in and accusing him of weaponizing race for personal gain. They released edited footage from Krantz's dashboard cam, conveniently excluding audio and key moments to suggest that Marcus had been evasive and uncooperative. But their spin began to unravel when a surprising new development emerged. A whistleblower, a city IT technician named Evan, quietly contacted Naomi Hughes. He had seen the server logs and knew the body cam footage hadn't been lost. It had been intentionally disabled moments before the altercation escalated. Worse, he hinted that this wasn't the first time footage linked to Officer Krantz had mysteriously vanished. Intrigued and alarmed, Naomi urged Evan to come forward, offering legal protection if he testified. With this potential smoking gun and increasing public support, Naomi petitioned the court to subpoena internal body cam system records and officer misconduct files. The judge granted the motion, citing the need for transparency. Meanwhile, Marcus's community rallied behind him. Grassroots organizations launched awareness campaigns. Neighbors, co-workers, and former students spoke out, affirming Marcus's character and condemning the racial bias embedded in their own police force. It was becoming clear this lawsuit was turning into a movement, but the real storm was yet to come. As pressure built and the defense began to buckle under growing scrutiny, the stage was set for a courtroom confrontation that would reveal more than anyone expected. What started as a late-night traffic stop was now threatening to bring down a wall of silence that had stood for years. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. Reporters filled the press benches, activists stood outside chanting for justice, and a tense energy hung over the room. For Marcus Bell, the moment was surreal. Just weeks earlier, he'd been a private man working in tech. Now, he stood at the center of a legal firestorm that was forcing an entire city to reckon with uncomfortable truths. Judge Marilyn Cortez, known for her firm but fair demeanor, presided over the case. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. On one side sat Marcus, his attorney Naomi Hughes by his side. On the other, Officer Daniel Krantz appeared calm but guarded, flanked by his high-powered legal team and supported by representatives from the police union. What no one yet knew was that the trial would soon veer in a direction no one had expected. Naomi opened with a powerful statement. This case is not about one stop, one man, or one officer. It's about a system that repeatedly fails people who look like Marcus Bell. And today, that failure stands trial. The defense responded with a dry and defensive argument, claiming the traffic stop was routine and that Krantz acted within the scope of his duty. They dismissed Marcus's accusations as exaggerated and insisted that he was leveraging public sympathy to secure a payout. Their core claim: there was no hard evidence of misconduct, especially since the body cam footage had been lost. The trial moved quickly into witness testimonies. Marcus took the stand first, recounting the events in vivid detail. His voice was steady, but the pain in his eyes was evident as he described the fear he felt when Krantz gripped his holstered weapon and searched his car without cause. He testified to the emotional toll it took on him and how it reminded him of the racial injustices his father had endured decades earlier. Under Naomi's questioning, Marcus was poised and articulate. Under cross-examination, the defense tried to paint him as hostile and overreactive. But their strategy began to backfire. Marcus remained calm and unwavering, earning the sympathy of the jury and visibly frustrating the defense. Then came the turning point. Naomi introduced a critical piece of evidence, a recovered backup file from the city's internal tech system. It was a partial body cam recording obtained through the whistleblower, Evan. Though only 48 seconds long, it captured what the department had tried to suppress. Officer Krantz calling Marcus a racial slur under his breath as he ordered him out of the car. The courtroom gasped. Even Judge Cortez leaned forward, eyebrows raised. Krantz's legal team objected furiously, but the judge allowed the clip to be admitted into evidence. This speaks directly to the credibility of the defendant and the nature of the encounter, she said firmly. Krantz was visibly shaken. His earlier calm gave way to nervous fidgeting as the prosecution announced they would be seeking access to his full disciplinary record. The court was no longer dealing with a case of miscommunication. This was proof of prejudice caught on tape. Public opinion exploded. Social media lit up with calls for justice. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse. News headlines declared, "Officer caught using slur on body cam in civil rights trial." And inside the courtroom, Judge Cortez ordered a review of Krantz's full record, setting the stage for the next explosive phase of the trial. With the racial slur from the recovered body cam footage now public and admissible, the courtroom shifted into a more serious and ominous tone. Judge Marilyn Cortez, disturbed by what she had seen, ordered the release of Officer Daniel Krantz's full disciplinary and personnel file, including internal affairs reports and any previous complaints. What began as a single traffic stop had now cracked open the door to a long-hidden pattern of misconduct, and what came to light next shocked everyone in the room. Naomi Hughes, Marcus Bell's attorney, spent the next few days meticulously analyzing the newly obtained records. What she found was a disturbing pattern. 8 prior civilian complaints had been filed against Krantz in the last 6 years. All involved Black or Latino men. The charges ranged from excessive force to unlawful search and verbal abuse. Strikingly, none of the complaints had resulted in disciplinary action. In many cases, the files had been marked unsubstantiated and quietly closed. Even more damning were internal memos Naomi discovered from superiors who had flagged Krantz's behavior multiple times. One lieutenant had written, "Krantz demonstrates aggressive behavior in minority-heavy patrol zones, recommending retraining or reassignment." That memo had been ignored. Another captain's warning read, "Concerning language used in recent arrest audio could pose legal risk to department." It too was dismissed. When Naomi presented this evidence in court, Judge Cortez was visibly disturbed. She allowed several of the prior complainants to testify. One man, Jamal Rivers, tearfully described being slammed against his car by Krantz in front of his children after a minor speeding violation. Another, a delivery driver named Luis Mendoza, said Krantz accused him of looking suspicious and demanded to search his work van without cause. Each testimony painted a consistent picture of a rogue officer acting with avowed impunity and a department unwilling to hold him accountable. The final nail in the coffin came from a surprise witness, a retired Brookfield police sergeant named Carl Simmons. Simmons, who had served over 30 years on the force, came forward voluntarily after seeing Marcus's story on the news. Under oath, he testified that the department had repeatedly shielded Krantz. "We were told to let it go," Simmons said. "The union always backed him. There was a culture of silence when it came to guys like Krantz. We were more afraid of making waves than we were of doing what was right." The courtroom was stunned. Naomi turned this testimony into a central theme of her case, not just about Krantz, but about institutional rot. When systems are designed to protect the guilty and punish the innocent, she argued, we cannot call that justice. Public outrage exploded. Activists demanded the resignation of the police chief. Protesters gathered daily outside the courthouse. National media outlets now had their eyes on Brookfield, and civil rights groups called for a federal probe into the department. Inside the courtroom, Judge Cortez announced that she would allow the jury to consider a broader scope of evidence given the consistent pattern of racial misconduct. This wasn't just about what happened to Marcus Bell anymore. It had become a reckoning with an entire system, and with the trial hurtling toward its conclusion, all eyes now turned to what the judge and jury would ultimately decide. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense on the final day of the trial. After weeks of testimonies, explosive evidence, and shocking revelations, the case of Marcus Bell v. Officer Daniel Krantz in the city of Brookfield had reached its conclusion. The jury, composed of a diverse mix of citizens, had been deliberating for nearly 48 hours. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, waiting for the outcome. Inside, Marcus sat silently, gripping the hand of his attorney, Naomi Hughes, his face a mix of anxiety and quiet resolve. When the jury filed back into the room, the silence was deafening. The foreman stood and, with a firm voice, read the verdict. We find the defendant, Officer Daniel Krantz, liable for all charges: racial profiling, unlawful detainment, violation of constitutional rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Gasps rippled through the room. Some cried. Marcus closed his eyes, overwhelmed with emotion, but the verdict was only the beginning of the fallout. The judge, in a rare move, gave a statement from the bench. Judge Cortez condemned not only Officer Krantz's behavior, but the department's culture of silence and protectionism. This court has seen not only the actions of a rogue officer, but the failure of an institution to discipline, retrain, or remove him. Such negligence cannot be tolerated in a just society. With those words, she ordered $3.5 million in damages to be awarded to Marcus Bell, $2 million in compensatory damages, and $1.5 million in punitive damages. The decision sent shockwaves through Brookfield and beyond. Moments after the verdict, the district attorney, pressed by public outcry and new federal interest, announced the opening of a criminal investigation into Officer Krantz. Within days, Krantz was formally arrested and charged with civil rights violations, obstruction of justice for disabling his body cam, and falsifying reports. The arrest was televised, showing Krantz being taken into custody in his own uniform. Symbolic moment that quickly went viral. The police chief of Brookfield, under enormous pressure and facing his own internal review, resigned. In his resignation statement, he admitted the department had serious failures in oversight and that changes were overdue. The mayor of Brookfield called an emergency town hall where residents voiced years of frustration over police misconduct, racial profiling, and ignored complaints. Other victims of Krantz began coming forward in droves. By the end of the week, at least 5 additional lawsuits had been filed, one of them involving a teenager wrongly arrested and held overnight with no charges. Civil rights organizations pledged to monitor the department until long-term reform was in place. As for Marcus, he stood before the media with humility and power. "This was never just about me," he said. "This was about accountability, about not being afraid to demand it. I'm grateful for justice, but justice should never come this late or this hard." The win empowered more than just one man. It inspired a movement. Protest signs turned into petitions. March led to legislation. City councils across the region began reviewing use-of-force policies and body cam regulations. Brookfield's trial became a national symbol of what happens when silence is broken and truth is pursued no matter the cost. But even as the courtroom emptied, Marcus knew the real work was just beginning. In the weeks and months following the explosive conclusion of Marcus Bell v. Officer Daniel Krantz, the impact of the case continued to ripple across the city, the state, and eventually the entire country. What began as a single man's fight for justice had evolved into a national conversation about police accountability, institutional racism, and civic responsibility. Marcus, once a quiet, private tech engineer, was now a respected civil rights advocate. Though he returned to his job part-time, much of his energy shifted toward activism. He founded the Bell Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of police misconduct gain legal access, psychological support, and media visibility. Within its first 6 months, the initiative provided aid to over 50 families, some of whom had suffered in silence for years. Meanwhile, Brookfield's entire police department underwent a comprehensive audit ordered by both state officials and the U.S. Department of Justice. Findings revealed a staggering number of internal complaints, many that had been dismissed or destroyed. Officers were forced to recertify under new bias training protocols, and several high-ranking officials who had enabled or ignored misconduct were either fired or forced into early retirement. A community oversight board was established, composed of local activists, civil rights attorneys, and regular citizens. The board was granted unprecedented access to internal police records and decision-making processes, ensuring transparency that had never before existed in Brookfield. More significantly, statewide legislation inspired by Marcus's case was passed, the Bell Act. The law made it illegal for body cam footage to be manually disabled during active stops, required all racial profiling complaints to be reviewed by an independent agency, and imposed mandatory suspension for officers found lying in official reports. Other states soon began drafting similar reforms, signaling a broader shift in the culture of policing across America. National media outlets featured Marcus regularly, portraying him as a symbol of courage and quiet strength. He gave a TED Talk titled "The Night That Changed Everything," in which he challenged the audience, "Don't wait for injustice to find you before you fight it. Find it, stand in front of it, and say, 'Not this time.'" The talk went viral, reaching millions across the globe. Marcus's personal life also changed. The emotional trauma of the incident remained, but through therapy and community, he slowly rebuilt a sense of peace. He reconnected with family, especially his younger brother, who had been inspired to apply to law school. "You gave me a reason to fight with purpose," his brother said tearfully one evening. As for Officer Krantz, he was eventually convicted on federal civil rights charges and sentenced to 9 years in prison. His case served as a warning to other officers who believed they could act with impunity behind a badge. In Brookfield, murals were painted downtown, one of them featuring Marcus's face alongside the words, "Justice isn't a gift. It's a demand." His story was added to university curriculums, law textbooks, and civil rights forums. Students studied it. Scholars dissected it. Leaders quoted it. And through it all, Marcus Bell remained steady. Not because he had sought attention, but because he had been thrust into a moment of truth and chose to face it. The legacy of his fight reminded everyone watching that when one person stands up, others find the courage to rise beside them.